Добрый день, глубоко уважаемые.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues and guests. Today is the 27th of April, 2021, 2 o'clock Moscow time. And allow me to consider the Dissertation Council for Defense of the Dissertation Sivokon Viktorovna for the degree of Candidate of Sociological Sciences in the Scientific Speciality 220004, Social Structure, Social Institutions and Processes, on the topic Sociodynamics of Values and Value-Based Focus of Employees of Russian Corporation, as exemplified by Northwestern Region, considered open. By order of the Academic Secretary St. Petersburg State University, A. Viktorovna, of the 12th of February 2021, number 1119/1, I, Prul Nikolai Alexandrovich, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Social Management and Planning, St. Petersburg State University, was appointed the Chairman of the Gestation Council. By the same order, the members of the Gestation Council were approved. Allow me to introduce them. Tarandor Yelena, Doctor of Economics, Professor of the Department of Economic Sociology, St. Petersburg State University. She is present offline. Online are present the following people: Rubtsova Maria, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Associate Professor of the Department of Planning, Brozevich Sviatoslav, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Professor of the Department of International Relations, Meteorology, Political Science and History, St. Petersburg State University of Economics. Can you see and hear us? Yes, I'm with you. Lipatova Lyudmila Nikolaevna, here, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Management, Economics and Finance, Saransk branch of the Russian Academy of National Economy, Public Administration, under the President of the Russian Federation. Can you see and hear us? Yes, everything fine. Thank you for the invitation. Titarenko Larisa Grigorieva, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, a Professor of the Department of Sociology, Belarus State University, Belarus. Larisa Grigorievna, can you hear and see us? Thank you. The applicant herself is also present with us, Sivokon Maria Viktorovna. Also at the meeting, the academic consultant is also present, Zirugin Pavel Petrovich, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Sociology and Political Science, St. Petersburg State Technical University. Lectee in the name of Ulyanov. To improve the quality of communication, I ask you, dear colleagues who are with us online, to turn off your microphones. But please do not forget to turn them on when you're given the floor. Thank you. And I also inform you that audio media recording of our meeting is being conducted, and live broadcast is conducted on the Petersburg State University website. Simultaneous translation of speeches from Russian into English and from English into Russian is being performed. Currently, there is an email address posted on the live broadcast of the meeting in the Station Council, where during the meeting all listeners can express their opinion and send questions to the online messaging service to the applicant concerning the dissertation and the current scientific discussion of the speech, and thereby take part in the scientific discussions. These questions will be sent by the technical service to me, and I will voice them during the discussion. Questions must be related to the applicant's presentation and the content of the dissertation, and it is necessary to give information on the name and surname, place of work, and position. Questions not related to the scientific discussion and to the discussion of the dissertation and to the thesis, the text, and the assessment of the thesis itself, and anonymous questions will not be voiced. In accordance with the procedure for awarding the academic degree of Candidate of Sciences, academic degree of Doctor of Sciences is Petersburg State University, approved by local regulations at St. Petersburg State University. Hereinafter the procedure. The meeting of the Dissertation Council is considered competent if at least 2/3 of the approved composition members take part in its work. Not less than 4 people. Our Dissertation Council consists of 6 people. All 6 are present, including 4 board members in remote online mode. All members of the Dissertation Council and the applicant are provided with audio-visual contact. Thus, there is a quorum. Dear colleagues, everybody present, I establish the following rules of the procedure for today's meeting in the Dissertation Council with a total duration of about 2 hours. First, brief information from the chairman about the applicant and the documents submitted by the applicant for a scientific degree and their compliance with the established requirements. Answers to possible questions. About 5 minutes. Short presentation by the applicant reflecting the main point of the thesis and research. About 15 minutes. Questions to the applicant strictly according to the report. No more than 2 minutes per question. Answers of the applicant. No than 5 minutes for everything. Speeches of all members of the Dissertation Council in turn with the assessment of the decision research and the applicant's speech with questions and suggestions for the applicant. About 10 minutes per speaker. Seven answers of the applicant for a scientific degree to the questions and comments of the members of the Dissertation Council. No more than 20 minutes. 8. Open discussion. Reviews at the request of from the present people in the hall with brief summary of the position or specific questions or suggestions to the thesis strictly on the topic of the research. No more than 2 minutes per each interested person. At the same time, we ask all those who are willing to ask questions to register in the registration form and introduce themselves before asking questions. 9. Submission by the chairman of question addressed to the applicant, which came in order to discuss the speech and scientific discussion on the broadcast of the meeting of the Dissertation Council on the website of the university. I'd like to draw attention to the fact that written questions, the announcement of which might take longer than 2 minutes, will not be voiced. 10. Answers of the applicant no more than 2 minutes per question. 11. Presentation of the scientific supervisor for the applicant no more than 3 minutes. 12. Discussion by the members of the Dissertation Council before the open vote. The sound during the discussion of the results of the dissent is muted. About 5 minutes. 13. Open roll call. Counting of votes by the chairman of the Dissertation Council. And the final result is written down into the minutes of the meeting. 14. Making a decision awarding or not awarding an academic degree. 15. Concluding remarks of the applicants. Dear colleagues, are there questions or objections considering this regulation and procedure? There are no objections. No objections. Well, as far as I understand, there are no objections. Then I will proceed to the implementation of the procedure. Before, please turn off the sound of your mobile phones. My dear colleagues in the Gestation Council, those who are in a remote online mode, I ask you not to turn off the phones to enable prompt communication with you in case of technical problems. Thank you for understanding. So, we're starting the meeting. Brief report of the applicant. No, I'm sorry. First, the chairman's report. The dissertation of the thesis of Maria Viktorovna Sivokon for the degree of Candidate of Sociological Sciences in the major 220004, Social Structure, Social Institutions and Processes. On the topic Sociodynamics of Values and Value Focus of Employees of Russian Corporation, as exemplified by Northwestern regions. Was accepted for defense by the Order of the Academic Secretaries in Petersburg State University, Candidate AV, dated the 2nd of February 2021. Number 799/1. Sivokon Maria Viktorovna wrote her thesis research on the base of the St. Petersburg State Electrotechnical University, LIT, named after Ulyanov Lenin. Scientific supervisor, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Professor at the Department of Sociology and Political Sciences at St. Petersburg State Electronical University, LIT. Dirugin Pavel Petrovich. The number of publications of the applicant, which the main scientific results of the gestation are stated according to the list presented, are 17 works. In peer-reviewed scientific publication from the list, approved by the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation, there are 3 publications. The applicant submitted to the Academic Secretaries in Petersburg State University and complete package of documents for reception for consideration defense of the thesis. All documents correspond to Clause 12 of Section 3 of the procedure. All documents submitted by the applicant on the information I received from the curator meet the requirements and are stored in the applicant's attestation file. Copies of them are held by the employee of the Department of the Provision of the Activities of the Gestation Council, who is now attending the meeting. And before giving the floor to the applicant, I have a question to the members of the Gestation Council. Are there, dear members of the Gestation Council, any questions, general questions, to the applicant, including whether there is a need to announce and consider the entire list of documents submitted by the applicant for defense? There are no questions and there is no need. I can see that all the colleagues agree. There is no need. Then we proceed, and now we give the floor to the applicant. About 15 minutes. Good afternoon, dear Chairman, members of the Gestation Council. The topic of the thesis is defined as Sociodynamics of Values and Value Focus of Employees of Russian Corporation, a network approach as exemplified by Cooperation in the Northwest region. Applicants: Sivokon Maria Viktorovna, Scientific Advisor, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Dirugin Pavel Viktorovich. The relevance of the dissertation topic is the following. First, according to governmental statistics, out of 72 million of Russians employed in labor activity, about 44 million people work in different organizations. That is more than half of the entire working population. The overwhelming majority of operating organizations in Russia are corporations with all the characteristic features and forms of organization of labor activity. The fact in itself indicates that corporate organizations have the most significant impact on the life and development of the Russian society. And according to Parsons, the values in corporate organizations are an active factor in the formation of the entire social structural society. We view corporate employees and their value as a factor in creative activity, a factor in shaping Russia's economic and social potential. Moreover, the scientific community will increasingly turn to research on corporate values. According to Russian and foreign sociologists, in a post-COVID situation, many corporations will be forced to switch to remote forms of work, which will greatly intensify the problem of studying the transition to value management. New developments will be required at a new level of systematization and generalization and conceptualization of corporate values. Cooperation as a form of labor activity demonstrates a number of important characteristics that enables it to carry out its activity under the conditions of transformation and change. Thus, on the 21st of April 2021, Vladimir Putin said that the revenue of the cooperative sector will beat the records despite the problems encountered. It is also important to emphasize the resources to be used for socially important ideas. At the same time, many such ideas as corporatism are perceived negatively by many citizens, quite negatively. From a scientific point of view, this sociological analysis of the sociodynamics of corporate values is of particular research interest, being one of topic areas of modern sociology. Firstly, the development of new approaches is due to attention to theoretical and methodological studies of the history of cooperation as a special form of social institutions from the standpoint of modern sociological concept, as well as the development of the basis of sociology-grounded principle of transition to value-based approach in corporate management. Well, in here we can see that the relevance is obvious. Only within the framework of sociological science can an adequate direction of such research be formed, since the values of corporations are inevitably linked with values of higher order, with values of social system, that is. Thirdly, the values and value focus of the corporation's employees in the changing social and economic circumstances of the post-industrial society are undergoing many new transformations as a social phenomenon. At the same time, the study of the problems under considerations are not very active. For example, according to the data by Kavalina and Cheglova, despite the growing interest in the issues to corporate values, no one can state the lack of such and value-oriented management in the Russian context. The existing publications on the use of corporate values in management are based on research carried out in other countries. Naturally, such studies are limited for application on the territory of the Russian Federation and do not fully reflect all those realia that are characteristic of the value of the world of Russians. All the above mentioned factors and some other circumstances allow us to say that the scientific, theoretical and applied terms, the topic might be recognized as an urgent research task of sociological science. The purpose, object and subject of the dissertation research was considered by us as an integrated element of research strategy, aimed at studying, identifying and characterizing the content of values and value focus of employees of a corporation in the Northwest region on the basis of a network approach. It was on purpose that we chose the corporations of the Northwest region. There is a meaning in it because in this region there are a multitude of corporations which are well known and have enough experience to work in the market under the free market economy, and interact with domestic and foreign corporations. Based on the results of this study, the following provisions have submitted for the defense. Sociodynamics of corporate values can be characterized both at the macro and micro social levels. At the macro level, sociodynamics of corporate values is used as an important determinant of the social structure of society, accompanying the development of human society, starting from prehistoric times. At different stages of development of society, new values emerge. Micro level, social dynamics of corporate values is continuous change and transformation of the system of values and value focus of the employees as a social subject resulting from interaction with the external environment in which the corporation operates and under the influence of transformation and value orientation of its personnel as the main component internal environment of the corporation. The first provision involves the substantiation of a scientific principle and theoretical approach, showing the feasibility of studying the social dynamics of corporate values, both at the macro and microsocial levels, in the unity and contradictions of these levels of research. In the interest of proving this unity, Dissertation explores classical and model theoretical methodological approaches, addressing the study values as a social phenomenon. Various sides and facets of sociodynamics of values along the axis society, cooperation, personality. The authors of various directions of sociology in schools regarding values and variations are disclosed in the thesis. In particular, we turn to the study of work, starting with works of Compton, Spencer, Wendell Bandon, Rickert, Schutz and Garfinkel, Durkheim, Sivokon, Parsons and Merton, Luhmann, Schwartz, Shane, and other classic works which form reliable scientific foundation for the study of values. The central place in our studies of sociodynamics of corporate values was occupied by a platform close to the position of the descent in sociology of Weber, Simmel, Thomas, as well as Ferdinand Tonnes, which showed that the growth of personality during the transition of community to society that was largely predetermined through the development of corporate organizations. Generally speaking, the position on the unity and contradiction of macro and micro levels of research is based on numerous works of modern authors, including the authors of St. Petersburg State School of Sociologics. As a result of generalizations based on the results of paragraph 1 and 2, the theoretical part of the dissertation, conclusion was drawn that confirmed the feasibility of studying the social dynamics of values and value orientation of corporate employees as social phenomenon. As the argument of the provisions of the macro and micro levels of research value, the dissertation development presented text and a number of anonymity, revealing some of the important aspects of the particular. Firstly, that the past experience is concentrated in values, the present is refracted, and the future is projected. Next, the values connect as goals and means of activity as found in the positions of Rakic, and values can also be considered in results of activities as demonstrated by Yuldashev. What is more, it is important to consider the unity and contradiction in the coexistent material and spiritual values of cooperation. Generally speaking, we can say that the dissertation makes a conclusion about the universal characteristics of values as an object of sociological research. Thesis gives definitions of values in their own broad sense. It characterizes sociodynamics of values as a process caused by a combination of various factors. The second provision for the defense is to consider the circumstances of change in corporate values, the sociodynamics. And here we can find three important approaches to understand the sociodynamics reflected here. First, transformation of corporate values are investigated as a result of historical development of corporations, their evolution. The dependence of corporate values on social and economic circumstances in which the corporation operates. In certain stages, the recognition of corporation by legal entities might be considered a value. Currently, this situation is one of the requirements. Further, sociodynamics of value is shown as a result of resolving the contradiction between the declared values of the contrarians and, on the other hand, the subjective values of the participants, holders, managers, industrial personnel, and so on. Finally, sociodynamics of values are used as conditioned by changes in the immediate environment of the corporation, of consumers, suppliers, and competitors. The dissertation concludes that the sociodynamics of corporate values is determined by cause and effect relationship, the necessity to fulfill the mission and declared function, as well as the social subjectivity of the corporation. Sociodynamics of corporation value arises as a result to resolve contradiction between the declared values during the activity of the corporation and the subjective values of the participants, shareholders, managers, industrial and production personnel. Sociodynamics of corporate values is based on a cause and effect principle. The need to fulfill its mission and declared function, as well as the social subjectivity of the corporations. What is more, our research was aimed at studying sociological matter that characterizes the historical evolution and transformation of corporate values as corporations emerge as social organizations in social times. As a result, different types of corporations were identified. The first period, from ancient times to 509 till 27 AD, the emergence of proto-corporations. The second period, from the 1st to the 10th century AD, mass emergence of religions and professional corporations. Third period, revival of craft corporations. The fourth period, 1517, massive growth of craft. The fifth period, from the 18th till the 20th century, the era of capitalist corporations. At each of the identified stages, we can see qualitative change in corporate values, which were significantly different from the previous and subsequent times. The emphasis is made on numerous corporate values that arise as a result of the aspiration of members of corporation for high quality of production of goods and services. The value of high-quality productions of goods and services concentrates around itself many social derivatives that accompany the activities of European corporations for a long historical period of time. The most important values of the corporate organization should be recognized as the desire to form an independent legal entity, the creation of specific internal environment of the corporation, the main feature of which is the presence of a collective governing body, collective private property, the presence of special motivation for effective work. With the beginning of the period of corporate capitalist association, corporate values are qualitatively modified, primarily due to the involvement of hired workers in the corporation. Provision 3 put forward for the defense involves considering the sociodynamics of the values of corporate employees in the context of a system network approach. Corporate values are a social dynamic system that integrates the independent values of society, corporation, personality, which reflects the goals, meaning, and result of corporation activity, and which are significantly influenced by management activities, as well as the contract environment of the corporation. Ultimately, corporate values reflect processes of intercorporate integration and disintegration. The analysis of sociodynamics of corporate values is carried out on the basis of an integrated approach with diagnostics of their systematic properties based on approach. Network diagnostics of sociodynamics of corporate values is a tool for fixing their transformation and the base for making decisions on the implementation of management strategy based on values. In interesting considering the person, the values of the corporation employees are shown as a set of systems and subsystems to value of different orders. Microgroups in informal structure are thus created to promote the national culture to managerial activity. Based on the research of modern authors, the thesis summarizes and analyzes the immutable roles of the values of corporations, and this acts as a means of motivation, means of increasing income and meeting the interests of stakeholders, a means of forming macro environment and socio-psychological climate of the corporation. Values are considered as a condition of solidarity, identification, and integration of the corporation. Values are presented as source of inexhaustible social and psychological conflicts. The role of value in the formation of corporate social responsibility is revealed. At the stage of transformation of the theory in practice to ensure corporate social responsibility was shown. In the study of corporate values, some tendency and threat can be seen as a system. Value as evaluation. Value is a criterion in standard in choosing alternative orientation. Role as an effective cognitive symbol to formalize a concept and ideas about the desired. The role of value is the goal and means, and then is a result of product. It should be especially emphasized that the methodological position and the views of values didn't always find reflection in the system of connection of goal, means, results, and scientific methods of empirical research. The dissertation shows a number of options, ways of combination of individual corporate values and approaches with the diagnostic of the unity. The analysis allowed out to summarize and understand the signs indicator that characterize the state of the value system. And based on this, formulate requirements for the construction of the research strategy and determine the possibility of implementation of the requirements in empirical diagnostic procedure. And now we're paying the conceptualization of the network analysis serves the scientific justification for technologies and methods used to conduct empirical research. Subsequently, as a result of empirical study, it was concluded from being expedient to diagnose corporate values using an integrated approach. Network analysis plays an important role in this complex. In Chapter 2, corporate values are provided to us in the context of computer-based analysis. It's also important to talk about the important values. These are networks associated with a system of higher order networks of corporate values as a result of practical communication. Corporate value networks as a result of direct contact. The analysis shows that the values of corporations play not only a positive role, but also acts as a source of conflict between the corporation and society, between the corporation and corporation, between corporation and the employees of the corporation. An important point to characterize the values is the concept of corporate relationship, which describes the attitude of corporation and society. And the thesis talks about several stages of forming this cooperative responsibility. Statement 4 is related to the methodological problems of network diagnosis of corporate values, in particular in the systematization of set of indicators that make it possible to analyze the value system as a corporation becomes a social organization. According to the results of the studies associated with this important distinction of sociodynamics, which generally present the weight of significant value and the strength of their connection with other values. The results of empirical research confirmed the relevance of such measurement of networks, which was verified by some other sociological research. Empirical results have confirmed that value networks of corporations at different levels of development differ considerably in a number of characteristics. The weight of the indicator, the workload of the network. The characteristic of the social values is increasing. Later on, the strategy was modified, translated into Chinese, Vietnamese, English, and used in more than 20 studies of organizations. So these are the main results of the thesis, which show that on the whole the objectives of the research have been achieved and the tasks have been solved. Thank you for your attention.
Спасибо, Мария Викторовна. Я хотел бы задать вопрос члену.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions following the report of the applicant? Well, the report based on the main provisions of the report. So any questions to the content of the presentation? If the rest of questions, ask the questions, please. Lyudmila Nikolaevna, you're welcome. Well, after reading the thesis, I had a number of questions. Was the expertise of collective treaties conducted by the organizations which became the scope of research? Because this document is necessary to form corporate values if there is a decree between the workers and stimulus. Was it possible to appraise the efficiency of the level of work? Is there the system of appraising the participants of the workload? If the work is not paid enough, or there are some ungrounded differences, it might serve as a hindrance to the general positive result of forming corporate values. Thank you very much. As for collective treaties, we knew information about them, and they are conducted by the legal documents of the Russian Federation. But such benefits as payment for holiday did not have any information about that. Next question. According to the question of getting information about the value and the benefits that employees receive, I was not provided with that information. And the workers who might receive substantial revenue are usually the owners of the company. Having talked to different members of different working groups, they get not enough dividends, and they do not get them on time. So the mechanism of forming corporate values is not used on all of the corporations and factories, and where it is used, it is not highly efficient. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? Maria Viktorovna, I'm absolutely sure that you know that there was labor forums in Petersburg, and it had such name of the sections as decorporatization. Well, have you analyzed such a phenomenon as decorporatization? Because I can see that in your work, much emphasis is put on the importance of the corporation. But as you can see, some sociologists say that their role is decreasing and might be decreasing in the future. How do you see that? Maria Vladimirovna, thank you very much for your question. You haven't analyzed that, but maybe in the future we might consider this issue, so we didn't work on this issue yet. Any more questions, dear colleagues? Maria Viktorovna, I have a question. I know that you work in one of the largest Russian corporations. Have you conducted research in this corporation? And if you haven't, are you planning to conduct research there? Thank you very much for your question. The point is that the company I'm working for has a very strict approach to carrying out any kind of research. So I need to have proof that I can conduct certain experiments. That is becoming a candidate of sciences. But in the future, I'm planning to conduct such research and classification. The corporation itself can be found in the northwestern region, and it will allow me to have a large scale of participants. Are there any more questions on the floor? I have a question. I really liked your chronological order because the beginning of the birth of cooperation, because when you talk about one of the stages, you said year 509 BC and 27 AD. How did you get so accurate? Well, it was achieved by studying some of the scientific research works and books. Thank you. Dear colleagues, are there any more questions? There are no more questions. If there are no more questions, they move on to the next part of our work, which is related to the reviews of the Dissertation Council, with the appraisal of the dissertation work, with questions and proposals to the applicant. That part of our work corresponds to the next point in our procedure. I'd like to say that the applicant might answer the questions in the order that they appear, that is, after each review, or the applicant might give answer to all the questions in one go. I'll be providing answer following each and every remark. Yes, I also wanted to offer you to answer that after every single comment. Dear colleagues, I'd like to say that we didn't receive any external reviews. So we'll move on to the reviews of the members of the Gestation Council. Since all the reviews were published online on the State University website, so I'd like to propose to talk about only the key principles and ask questions or give negative comments to the member of the Gestation Council. Does everybody agree? Agreed. And the members of the Gestation Council who are working with us offline, they also agree. Then we move on, reading the reviews by the members of the Gestation Council. So we'll go in the alphabet order. We start with Sviatoslav Brzezic. Dear colleagues, let me introduce you to my review, which I concluded based on the work of Sivokon Viktorovna. And as the distinguished chairman said, the main accent is done, or the main emphasis is put on certain issues and aspects. The thesis by Sivokon Viktorovna is definitely relevant and important if we talk about a scientifically theoretic and applied approach, because in the conditions of new forms of economics, there is a need to transform the corporate system. The changing information of key values in order to have a more stable market presence. So it is worth noting that not only the topic itself is relevant, but the results of the work will be relevant as well. They have a high practical value. Reliability of the data is provided by the use of methodological information, the comprehensive approach using strategic and empirical methods, the use of mathematical and statistical apparatus of data processing, as well as a high-quality examination of the current sociological science. The importance of this work, of the results obtained, is indispensable, and the main provisions of the dissertation show what is being done in applied sociology in practice, which lays the basis to increase the knowledge in this area of sociological sciences. The importance of this process shows that qualitative and quantitative methods are used when we to take certain decisions when creating and implementing a certain corporate values in the company. And the number of methodologies allows us to identify open and latent corporate conflicts, both on the level of top management as well as on the level of separate groups of subjects, which promotes the development of cooperation as a whole. If we limit ourselves by the ideas that could be talked about in the review, because as you know, well, I said that this academic supervisor is well known in scientific circles. I would like to say that the dissertation is graduation thesis, which has the solution of sociodynamics of values and value focus of employees of corporations within the framework of network approach. This thesis is individualistic and complete work. Nevertheless, there are certain flaws, or questions, I'd rather say, in our opinion. So the questions are the following, and then I'd like to hear the answer of the applicant. First, the subject of the dissertation research needs to be adjusted or adapted, since it is different from the topic of the work and is much broader than the original name. So what led to such an exorbitant increase in the volume of dissertation? Thus, the author of the study identified the features of sociodynamics and trends in transformation of corporate values and variation to Russian corporation, different historical epochs and the present age. It seems that in public, the dissertation and network approach as a new phenomenon is a key aspect. Secondly, the results of comparative analysis and transformation dynamics of values and value rotation of employees of private and public corporate entities, which is of significant importance, had not been fully reflected. Third, the work reflects the values of state corporations have clearer and more normally fixed characteristics, especially when it comes to Russian corporation. And the fourth, there are certain stylistical and bibliographical errors in the work. Nevertheless, it does not decrease the importance of the work, and the thesis on the topics sociodynamics of values and value focus or value-based focus of the employees of Russian corporation, exemplified by network approach in the northwestern region. According to the procedure on 1st of September, number 206811, on the procedure of awarding their degrees, Executive State University, Sivokon Viktorovna deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Social Studies in the major Specialisation 220004. The member of the Dissertation Council, Przewicz Svetoslav. Signature and a stamp. Thank you very much.
Станиславович, Мария Викторовна, ваши, пожалуйста, ответы на замечания.
Your answers, please, or questions, if any. highly honored, Sviatoslav Stanislavovich. Thank you very much for all your recommendations and questions. I'm ready to answer your questions. The subject of the thesis requires adjustment since it is at odds with the topic of the work and much wider than the declared topic. Thus, the author has started to identify the facial sociodynamics and trends of transformation of corporate values as value orientations of Russian cooperation in different historic epochs and at present stage. It seems that in the topic of the dissertation, the network approaches as the new phenomenon.
Предмет диссертации заключается в попытке изучить
The intent of the research and the subject of the dissertation is to try to study, analyze, and systematize the history of development of corporations, their values, and from these points to have a look at the current state of values in Russian corporations, to provide the scientific interpretation of the values and orientations of Russian corporations that are characteristic of the present time. Thus, the subject of the study covers the analysis of the historical period of formation of corporations of their current state. The results of the part of the thesis are reflected in the first chapter. As for the network approach, we made an attempt to adapt a network approach in relation to the diagnosis of sociodynamics of the values of modern corporation. Initially, we considered the network approach only as a way
только как способ диагностики социодинамики ценностей на эмпирическом уровне. Но без обстоятельного социолого-исторического анализа результаты сетевой диагностики могли быть поверхностными. Нам представляется, что достоинство сетевого метода вполне адекватно может отражать основные характеристики социодинамики корпоративных ценностей применительно к конкретным организациям только на основе глубокой проработки научных данных о корпорации как об особом объекте исследования. Сетевой подход действительно является одной из ключевых сторон нашего исследования.
Вмешался перевод.
Однако, видимо,
Да, мы, к сожалению, слышим английский язык.
Однако, видимо, не случайно первая глава у нас...
Мы понимаем, а другие уже как у них получается. Нам понятно.
Теперь английский как-то не очень хорошо слышно.
Все в порядке.
Уважаемые коллеги, ну раз такая ситуация,
Да, слышно.
давайте объявим технический перерыв один.
Вот кто сейчас у микрофона?
Слышно меня?
Мария Викторовна? Нет, не дублируется переводчик.
Мне не слышно. Кроме переводчика на русском, мне сейчас ничего не слышно другого.
Переключи.
Я дернула, значит. Все, нет, все нормально. Все нормально, да.
Технический перерыв номер один завершен. Продолжаем работу нашего совета.
The network approach is indeed one of the key aspects of our research. However, it's probably no coincidence that our chapter is much broader in the scope and in the way it covers the characteristics of corporate values. The next question or the next issue says that the values are not fully disclosed, which is a high academic value. The paper shows that the values of corporations have a more clear and normatively based characteristics, especially if we're talking about large Russian corporations. According to the empirical research, the system of values of public corporations is much more developed than in private corporations. It is possible that some private corporations view the values of the employees is more formed and more systematic, and this was shown by further research. It seems that it would be more correct to say that in each specific case, a variety of characteristics of sociodynamics of values and orientations can develop incorporations of value forms of ownership. More importantly is the possibility to conduct the empirical tool for conducting empirical diagnostics is more important, which make it possible to fix the changes. So we accept this proposal. Dear Svetoslav Stanislavich, is one of the most promising areas of our research. Thank you. Then the next remark is that the paper does not represent methods and technologies for introducing key cooperative values into corporate practice. Well, this is part addressed in the appendices of the dissertation. In particular, it examines the methods for diagnostics, the value orientations, the result of which become the basis for making management decision. In fact, the problems of technology for implementing the result of network diagnostics of value requires special social study.
Исследования. Следующее замечание.
The next remark, that there are certain stylistic and bibliographical flaws in the work. Well, thank you very much for this comment. In our future work, I'll take note of all your remarks, and thank you very much for your review. Do you agree with all the answers? Yes, I agree with the author's view of all the above-mentioned remarks. And now I give the floor to Lyudmila Nikolaevna Lipatova. Well, the relevance of the topic is out of question. The classical works of the economic theory showed that the result of the work of the group exceeds the work of an individual. But sometimes it seems that the managers of the modern day have forgotten that, and those golden goodbye scandals and extreme high benefits provided to top management do not benefit the efficiency of the work of the company itself, and shows as a negative factor for the work group as a whole. And the collective work result is minimized. Not only the corporations lose because of that, but the society as a whole. And if, when we talk about material benefits of the revenue lost, then it might result in the decreased value of capital in general. There is such an idea that all people are equal, but some are more equal, and it cannot be translated into any other languages. Even in Russian, when you say more equal, it means that this is a wrong word. And all people understand that this means inequality. This means the lack of uniformity, and it serves as a negative factor for any work groups. As a result of the low estimation and a low understanding of the importance of collective work, the efficiency of a huge labor workforce is undermined, and it's impossible to obtain the most favorable results aimed. Thus, because of the social policy and brigade orientation in conducting the work load, allowed to get the same benefit with a less workforce. And projects created by the group often yield positive results. Very often in the model day scale, the work of a group is only viewed as the work of individuals working together, not yielding the common result leading to common cause. the mentality of different nations might play a certain role in this issue. And if we solve the problem, we might improve the environment in the work groups and get the surplus efficiency without additional expenses. As for the relevance of the work, the relevance is the following, that the fact of transformation of the corporate values is seen through different stages of corporate work. In our opinion, the most important factor is the following. The idea of interaction between work of large corporation and the society as a whole through the mechanism of forming social interaction during work labor based on forming of individualistic value orientations which trigger the creation of corporate values which improve the social level of the workers. Next, an approach to view the maturity level of the corporate values is provided, which corresponds to a specific stage of the work of the organization, based on determining the potential of the network, which is linked to the key qualities of a corporations aimed at the formation of its necessity. Then certain channels of the influence of the environment, such as suppliers, customers and others, as transformative forces of corporate values. The fourth, domineering approach and domineering influence of the style of management characterized by openness and democratic principles of leadership, readiness for dialogue and communication, is viewed as the key aspect. Well, in here I can see what the applicant does for the science, but I do have certain remarks. Much attention is paid to the history of the development of corporations, and within the framework of the thesis, this is justified only in order to identify the features of the value orientations or value factors of Russians in the world of work that have formed over the years, and the principles of entrepreneurial activity that have been tested throughout history. Therefore, it is necessary to represent this retrospective analysis in a more clear way. Next. The point of 5 of the scientific novelty says, as a corporation develops, this network indication grow and decrease. And different corporate values are characteristic of different stages of organization's life circle. And that was mentioned, and it is difficult to disagree with it. Some values emerge and can wait, while others, on the contrary, fade away. For example, there was a period in the development of corporation when the organization provided free housing to their employees, taking into account the length of their service and so on and so forth. And that was a powerful tool to form the sense of loyalty and involvement in the affairs of the team, which later on led to the formation of so-called labor dynasties. Well, nowadays, such corporate value is remains only in paper, even if it is written in some of the documents. I have one more remark, or rather question. Does the approach proposed by the author allow us to take into account the negative impact on the social situation in the workforce of fake corporate values that remain only on paper or in mottos? There are some cases when a team of orders is, and the idea is distorted during the implementation, double standards arise. And this also happens when assessing personnel and distributing different social benefits. And many principles, if principles are violated, this not only reduces trust in the company's management, but also divides the work group. Well, some people find themselves offended, some will find other supporters, and, well, it will result in a conflict. Another remark is the practical significance of the research result could have been higher if the proposed approach to assessing the degree of maturity of the system of corporate values based on determining the value potential of the network was brought to the stage of practical application. So far, few people, except for the author herself, can understand the information presented in figures 2.21 and 2.29. And it has already been mentioned that there are certain inaccuracies in the work and certain typos can be seen, but nevertheless, I consider that the thesis by Sivokon Maria Viktorovna on the topic Sociodynamics of values and value-based focus on employees of Russian corporations network approach is exemplified by Northwestern region is in line with the main requirements of the order of the St. Petersburg State University at the awarding of certificate of the Candidate of Social Studies. And Maria Sivokon might be awarded the Candidate of Sciences in Major 220004, Social Studies, Social Institutions and Processes. And the procedure hasn't been violated. Dear Lyudmila Nikolaevna, thank you very much for your remarks. I'm ready to answer your questions. Considering point 1, much attention is dedicated to the history of the development of corporations. Within the framework of the thesis, this is justified only in order to identify the features of value focus of Russians in the world of work that they have formed over many years. Therefore, these results of the retrospective analysis should be more clearly presented. As part of my thesis, this was done to some extent on purpose, with the aim of studying and demonstrating how significantly the level trends of development of corporations in Russia differ from the Western corporations. In the Russian market economy, there are no such corporations which operated like in Europe for 300 or 400 years. The majority of corporations in Russia are currently in the state of formation and emergence. Thus, the experience of the corporate activity at the value level is presented mainly in analytical materials that show how complex and comprehensive these objects of study is. But quite often, the historical analysis of corporate values in sociological materials is not studied or is studied only superfluously. It was important for us to study the historical context, but we will definitely take your wishes into and take your remarks into consideration in the future, and we intend to publish a work that will be dedicated to the history and formation of corporate values. Are you satisfied with the answers to your remarks? But there have been some more questions. I'm sorry. Yeah, we proceed then. On point 5 of scientific novelty, there is a following question. As the corporation is developing, the indicators are growing and increasing, and different corporate values are characteristic of different stages of the organization life cycle, and that was noted in the theoretical part of the thesis. Some values emerge, and while others fade away. For example, there was a period in the development of corporations when the organization provided free housing to the employees. And this was viewed as a powerful tool to form a sense of loyalty in the work team, which later on led to the formation of multi-generational labor dynasties. Currently, such a strategy, if is stipulated for on paper, on any documents, remains still insignificant. I will answer the following. Such values as promoting better living conditions for workers and organization are spelled out in the collective agreements of some corporations. In the event of a change of opportunities, corporations issue orders with amendments and additions to the document, where it is spelled out what categories of workers and what kind of assistance can be received. In our case, the weight of a network node reflects the result of its assessment by respondents and is calculated as the arithmetic mean. Along with it, as our empirical research shows, some network indicators such as network density, network span, and others can increase and decrease, reflecting the nature of sociodynamics of values, although this is not always the case. Most likely, there might be some options. Well, the next question is related to the following. Does the approach proposed by the author allow us to take into account the negative impact on the social situation in the work collective of work group of fake corporate values that remain on paper and mottos? There are frequent cases when an idea that is aimed at uniting a team is distorted, and this happens when assessing personnel. And the corporate value is a high level of qualification in this way. And when distributed benefits, in here cooperative value is caring for others. When principles are violated, this leads to the division in the work group. Some might be offended and the conflict is inevitable. In public corporation, in order to avoid such problems, at the regulatory level, the values are spelled out in a number of documents: Code of Corporate Values, Collective Agreement, Regulations, and other divisions and procedures. And employees are familiarized with these documents in writing. Normative documents might be supplemented and changed. It can be said that not all normatively defined values can be implemented. Sometimes they're not implemented and turn out to be fake in reality. As for the network approach, the result of its use will be the analysis of the indicators that are mentioned in the diagnostics procedure. Therefore, in order to provide the analysis of implemented values, it is necessary to conduct the interviews with corporation employees, analysis of attestation protocols, analysis of the performance of employees, and others. In part, these methods were used in the study at the initial stage of research, and the data significantly complement the result of network diagnostics. The next question. The practical significance of the research could be higher if the approach proposed by the author to the assessing the degree of maturity of the system of corporate values based on determining the value potential, the potential value of the network was brought to the state of practical application. We have already applied this method in other corporations, including cooperation on the territory of the Russian Federation and abroad in Europe and China. The practical application of the network diagnostic method show that in the overwhelming majority of cases, it is very easy to be implemented in practice and provides the visualization of the result obtained. This information is welcomed by the heads of management and corporations, and it provides to conduct the assessment diagnostics conducted in rather brief time. Experience has shown that it's more important to learn how to interpret the results, summarize information, draw conclusions, and develop recommendations. Your next remark is that there are certain inaccuracies in presenting the information. For example, on pages 110 and 12, there is a list of larger state corporation, and the legal form is not always indicated correctly. We've used the information from the documents from the period when the name and definitions of the statutory form of corporation at the time, and sometimes there might be a difference, and it might sometimes show the transition period of the corporations. Thank you very much once again for your remarks. Now, are you, Ludmila Nikolaevna, satisfied with the answers provided by the applicant? Yes, I have received the answers to all of my questions, and I can see that the applicant sees the development of the future studies and the direction of the future studies. Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to Maria Rubtsova. Let's check sound first. Well, can you hear me well? Dear colleagues, I'd like to say that it was a great pleasure for me to look through the dissertation. I would like to give the general overview, what are the benefits of this work and the advantages of this work, and then give more detailed idea of the negative aspects of the work. Well, in my review, you might see that I talk about the relevance of the topic, I personally think that decorporatization is not a definitive trend, as it is sometimes stated. Usually it is some kind of negative impact, since it might lead to the fact that it will be impossible to get to the aims and to the goals defined by the author, because it might lead to the loss of participation in social communities and in corporations, which might be beneficial, but later on might prove to be rather difficult, since the workers will be less socially protected, and as the author says, they will have few opportunities to formulate the adequate goals of their own development and cooperative development. But the question itself in the thesis, posed by the thesis, is very interesting, because it highlights the idea that cooperation has a very social meaning, and if the demand decreases, the social value has to be supported by some other institutions, or it will simply be lost. But so far we cannot understand what can supplement the stimulus of the development, which all emphasizes the importance of this topic. When we were trying to form new trends and tendency, it might show what our choices are and how it can develop. I always emphasize that such an approach to the topic is relevant. If we talk about the novelty of the research, I would like to say that this work is interdisciplinary in its essence, which is extremely important, because the analysis, which is a very important aspect, since it is not only part of sociology, but it belongs to other types of knowledge. And the author works on a historic background and similar aspects. Then I also mentioned that there is the social dynamics, and the data is systematized, where we can see that governmental and non-governmental are viewed separately, which is this approach is motivated by the situation in our country, and it is very interesting to view how these two types of corporations interact. And the third aspect is the novelty of the method of the use of network analysis. Then I say that the conclusions have applied significance, and they might be used in practical work of cooperation and in pedagogical aspects. So the thesis has a lot of positive sides. It is linked to sociology and is very important to the formation of the values, as it is interdisciplinary at the same time, since it allows to provide interdisciplinary approach, which might be interesting to the representatives of other fields and studies. Then I'd like to talk about certain aspects which I consider as disadvantages, and since it is a sociological idea, I would like to see the description of sociological base. Well, we can't say that it lacks, but it is not found clearly in the text. So, well, for me, it was a little bit difficult to find it in the text. And this approach to the network approach might be interesting for foreign colleagues. And such a fragmentary approach to the empirical base might mislead certain foreign researchers and understand what has the author done. And since we have a bilingual dissertation, I think that it is a very serious flaw, because it will hamper the spread of the information from this thesis. The fact is that the most important part of the work is the appendix, which is not quite logical, because there is no direct link between the text itself and the appendix, and there are certain conclusions are lacking. It is not a challenge for our scientific school, but as for foreign scientific school, it might be difficult. The same is related to the hypothesis. I couldn't find the hypothesis in the introduction, and I found it only on pages 157 and 77 of the work, where it is analyzed in detail. So I'd like to say that this hampers the analysis of the empirical research and the author's contribution. Well, my second comment, I'd like to say that the author has partially given explanation to this comment. So I'm not going to voice it. The most important is that there has to be no ambiguity in the interpretation. And the third remark is a more technical one. There might be some stylistic flaws and typos. So having analyzed this work, I would like to say that nevertheless it does not reduce the importance of the thesis, and the thesis can be considered a scientific work which is dedicated to sociodynamic of values and value-based focus of employees of Russian corporation, and is important for the development of the scientific methodology. It is a relevant work and provides novel approach to the research of the above-mentioned topic. In accordance with the decision on the 24th of September and the order of St. Petersburg State University from the 1st of September 2006, and the criteria to the thesis of Sociological Sciences are met. Thus, the author deserves to be awarded the degree of the Candidate of Social Sciences. Thank you for your attention. So that is the end of my review. Thank you very much for your review and for your questions. Would you please provide answers to these questions? Dear Maria Vladimirovna, thank you very much for your work with the dissertation. The first remark is that the description of the empirical base in the introduction gives only a superficial idea of which research has been conducted by the author. And disadvantage is compensated by the ascended appendices. And a clear description of the research hypothesis is not located in the introduction, but on pages 157 and 77. And this makes it difficult to analyze empirical research and the author's contribution. We will definitely take these comments into account. We have a lot of quoted materials in the appendices, but they had to be included in the main text of the dissertation work. As for the second remark, there is no a similar approach to the characteristics of the indices of the values and value orientations. I take this remark into account, and in the future I'll try to provide a more coherent and developed description. As to the third remark concerning typos and stylistic flaws, we accept this remark. We tried to improve the quality of the work in this way. Thank you very much for your remarks. Dear Larisa Grigorievna, now I give the floor to you. Thank you very much. I will not elaborate on the positive aspects of the work, because these ideas are voiced by my colleagues as well. But nevertheless, I will start with the positive aspects, and the relevance of the topic is the idea of corporate values, which is discursive in its essence, and it's very important for the development of Russia and scientific research. And I think that the network approach and the way it is used by the author as the way to analyze cooperative sociodynamics of corporate values, it makes the thesis quite relevant and highly interesting. The object is presented as the idea to determine the main characteristics of sociodynamics of the employees of Russian corporation based on the empirical analysis and network approach. And the object and the subject of the research, in my opinion, are viewed in a too broad way. And in here I need to repeat what has already been mentioned. Based on the goal and the scope, it was not necessary to talk about the history, to talk about prehistoric times and the history of Western corporations. Well, I do not disagree with that. If the author considered it necessary to talk about the historic aspect, it should have been stated in the object, in the subject of the research. So the historic aspect is definitely interesting and necessary, but it is not clearly formulated. This is why we wanted to clarify this aspect. It has been voiced by other participants of the council. The first chapter turned out to be too lengthy, and it is twice as long as the second chapter. As for novelty and recommendations of the thesis, they are well grounded since they are based on the concepts which are well established in the sphere.
Исследования, анализа, касающиеся.
The dissertation has the main approaches to the analysis and the dynamics of the values of cooperative values in accordance with scientific works. And the author uses a lot of historic material about the historical development on the territory of Russia and in the Western countries in this respect. Then the author provides individualized definition of values and value focus, gives based on what was given by the authors before the author. And the applicant analyzed the cooperative approaches to the values on different levels, and this why it increased the relevance of the approach. The social methods used imply a large number of information obtained through foreign research and research in the territory of the Russian Federation. And the results obtained by the author are not contrary to the results that might be found in the reference literature, and the obtained results are in line with the results obtained previously. As for the novelty is the following. The author characterized the sociodynamics of corporate values at different historic stages. Also noted the factors which influence the formation of corporate values. Talked about the transformation and changes of values in different socioeconomic systems. Characteristic traits of cooperative values. Then the novelty is in fact that there is it is pointed out that there is difference between the formation of corporations in Western Europe and Russia. What is more, there is a system of indicators of the cooperative values in Russia can be found. And it is possible to conduct the empirical analysis of cooperative values. Based on the materials of the empirical research, we can see the difference in the maturity level of cooperative values dependent on the level of development of the corporations themselves. And we can see the disclosure of the interaction between the cooperative values with values of a more social broad level. The method of network analysis allowed to calculate the network indicators at different levels of social development. And this information is important for practical application and from science as a whole. The research provides us for a conceptual approach to the understanding of the work of employees of corporation as a social phenomenon. And the materials and the thesis might be used in teaching training and in the future scientific research based on the study of cooperative values. But nevertheless, each work might have a certain negative aspects, and as we can understand, the applicant will start working on the future work to pay attention to the following issues. So there are certain theoretical flaws. Well, the applicant defines the theoretical and methodological approach as multi-paradigmatic, which allows to add the explanatory potentials of different theoretical concepts and thus form a heuristic model to identify the sociodynamics of corporate values based on the most useful concepts and theories. Well, nothing is said about how to form the most useful concept and theories. But in here, the author understands the concept as addition of different and a mixture of different theoretical definitions. And this mixed approach, if we talk about the methods, might be applied. But if we talked about mixing theoretical information, is not reliable. Because following this approach, we can see that there are different people, there are different authors of different types of approach, of different schools and direction, like Zanetsky, Luhmann, Sivokon, and Dolan. And the idea is not to combine different theoretical schools into one pot. It should be expanded on the issue of using so many authors in the theory part. So it's very interesting to know which authors does the applicant find more relevant to the concept. The second disadvantage is also related to the term. Starting from page 18, the author uses such a term as new time. So it means that this is not the epoch of bourgeois revolutions, starting from 1914. Later on, the author says that this is modern aspect of the time. So what does it mean? Is it the epoch of modern times? Later on it is said that this is post-Soviet Russia. But instead of modernity, you should have mentioned that we're talking about a modern Russia and Soviet times. And I, as a sociologist, think that this attitude to term seems to be a flaw. My colleagues have already mentioned that it was necessary to talk about a significant amount of materials from the appendices in the main part of the work, because very important aspects are not found in the text, and I suppose that some of them are not adequately expanded upon in the appendices. Sometimes there is no explanation given to why certain methods and certain figures were chosen. And everything that is related to the research itself should be found in the text itself, not in the appendices. And this is very important for a graduate thesis. So for the future, I would like to say that the applicant should take this into account, that all the aspects related to the methods should be indicated in the text of the work. And the cooperations analyzed are interesting and important, but they're not representative, at least for the Northwestern Europe. So it would have been cased as a case study, called a case study. The research would have been more accurate, because you do not provide the research of the whole Northwestern region, but certainly of certain corporations. As for Russian corporations, the statistics about Russian corporation date back only 5 years prior to the defense of the work. So it would be highly recommended to have a newer type of statistics. Maybe during the last year forum, there would have been statistics that could have been used as the newest one for such topic as the development of corporate values. And as everybody else has already mentioned, there are certain flaws in the layout of the dissertation. Although we've explained that there was a correct working, and nevertheless there are certain omission of letters, of words, and stylistic flaws, makes a rather negative impression on the reader. So the articles and dissertation has to be proved. And sometimes there are not enough references. So the applicant should be, next time, should be more focused on the way the work is laid out. But nevertheless, this does not undermine the value of the work. It shows the practice and research-oriented work and the dissertation of Maria Viktorovna Sivokon on the topic Sociodynamics of values and value-based focus of employees of Russian cooperation network approach, as exemplified by Northwestern region, is in line with the main requirements according to the order of the 1st of September 2006 on the regulations and the wording, the degree of the Candidate of Sciences in Petersburg State University, and the applicant Sivokon Maria that deserves being awarded the degree of the Candidate of Defense on Major 220404, Social Studies, Institutions and Processes. The regulations were not violated. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, and now we'd like the applicant to answer the questions and remarks. Dear Larissa Grigorievna, thank you for such detailed analysis of my work. and I'm ready to answer your questions. The first question. The applicant defines the theoretical and methodological approach as multi-paradigmatic, allowing for the addition of the explanatory potentials of different theoretical concepts based on the most adequate concepts and theories, page 15. Apparently, the author reduces multi-paradigm of the addition of different theoretical concepts. The mixed approach to the use of methods is generally recognized, unlike a mixed theoretical approach. And it has led to the fact that the quotations from authors of various schools might be found in the text, regardless whether these authors wrote about corporate values or about values in general. In our opinion, an explanation is required as to how the thesis combines the ideas of humanistic approach, understanding sociology, Parsons' structural functional theory, Luhmann's system theory, and Sivokon's integral theory. Or this combination is reduced only to the citing of all the above-mentioned authors. Undoubtedly, this is one of the very important issues, the in-depth study of which is expected in the future. When determining the basis of the methodological approach to the dissertation, we proceeded from the ideas of John Ritz about the multi-paradigm nature of sociology, in particular based on the principles of sociological research proposed above the demonstrated Sandwich Yadav. In his article, The Possibilities of Combining Theoretical Paradigms and Sociology, the author stresses that a multi-paradigmal approach is inseparable from the existence of sociology as a collective doctrine of society. So we consider that this stance can be characteristic and applicable to the study of such multifactorial phenomenon as value of corporation. This was not an easy task for the study, since the works of sociology is directly to the above-mentioned idea of sociodynamics of corporate values hasn't been published before. On the other hand, the multi-paradigm nature of the theoretical coverage of the thesis stems from the nature of the network method. According to Margrunovata, it's capable of embracing the forces and connection of various levels and types. And in essence, it's an approach that generalizes various principles of the study of session objects in sociology. Galina Vitalyevna supports the same idea about network theories. Identical positions regarding the multi-paradigm nature of sociological theories are actively supported by St. Petersburg State University professor and Doctor of Sociological Sciences Dmitry Ivanov and Yuri Valentinich Asachakov. In the theoretical part of the study, we try to offer a systematized vision of corporate values, which correlates with the concept of values in classical sociological theories. In the future, we hope to more accurately and correctly form our conceptual vision of the sociodynamics of corporate values. The next question. Considering the use of the term new time. Since the term is written with a small letter, this is not the era that is traditionally viewed from the historic point of view as a period from the bourgeois revolution till 1914. The applicant specifies that this is considered a modernity. So why do we need then the term Soviet Russia? Then it seems to be excessive. The term new time, is used allegorically, and in here we're talking about modern period. We will take this remark into account for future. As for the next remark, considering the empirical research, despite the richness of the data obtained, there are many questions about the methodology of construction and sampling. And the thesis says only about the number of figures, and there is no information on the principles and limitations of the obtained results. It's not clear why the research methodology itself is found in the appendix, while it should have become a very important part of the second chapter. Even in the appendix, there is no research program. And since the thesis is a little bit disproportionate, the second chapter could have included this information. The applicant clearly overdid with illustration of the obtained survey data. And this data is not representative even for the Northwestern region, rather case study. And arguments in favor of choosing this region are not presented. As for the coverage of the materials of empirical research in the text of the dissertation and the appendices, we have included another part of the results that, in our opinion, is most important for the emphasizing the achievement of the research objectives. At the beginning of the work, we had a poor idea of the size and volume of the received empirical data. And this is why a significant part was put in the appendices, and much materials were found in the publication monograph in 2020. And these published works include the description of the diagnostic procedure, limitations, and a number of other issues specified in your review, and I suppose that this will be used in future. The second question, the applicant's handling of statistical data in Russian Corporation for the 1990s raised question. And according to the text, the research was completed in 2017, but the work continued until 2020, which implies updating statistics, at least concerning the number of corporations in Russia and Northwest region. And since corporate topics are relevant, your literature on it is constantly emerging. To a large extent, the plans for the preparation and defense of the dissertation was limited by the condition of the pandemic. For this reason, there were not enough conditions for such work and for the systematic work. Along with this, the material collected might form the basis of the research activities of the future. We plan on the basis of the obtained data to carry out a comparative analysis of sociodynamics of corporate values during the post-pandemic era. Next remark, considering the negligence, considering the stylistic errors, inconsistencies, omission of words and letters, errors in bibliographic description of the author's own works. The preparation of a thesis involves careful editing of the text aimed at its adequate presentation to the reader. And one more drawback of the dissertation is incorrect citation of most of the sources. More than half of the links refer to the full text of a particular work. The text of the dissertation was corrected several times, and professional proofreaders also participated in that. At the same time, the abundance of requirements for the design of the text could not be fully taken into account. We will try to avoid such flaws in the future. Dear Larissa Grigorievna, your comments and recommendations will help us with our future research, and I would like to thank you once again for the work done. Thank you very much. Dear Larissa Grigorievna is satisfied with an answer. And Maria Viktorovna promised to take everything into account, so of course I'm pleased with the reply. Yelena Turandot, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. My review could be found on the website of the university, so all those willing could have read this remark. I'll be rather brief. I want to say that this thesis is relevant, is novel, and has a practical applicability. And the high level of theoretical and methodological work of the research serves the basis of the discussion. Firstly, the dissertation provides for the emergence of the approach according to which the cooperative values might be considered as the condition and the factor of creating value-orientated employees and members. And it is said that cooperative values might be considered, comparative values are able to satisfy the needs of the members of corporations. Isn't there a substitution of the concept of need for the concept of value orientation? What is more, the text of the thesis contains excessive detail and unnecessary comments in explaining the theoretical fundamentation of the research and repetitions. Nevertheless, the thesis complies with all the regulations and requirements of the St. Petersburg State University on awarding the qualification of the Candidate of Social Sciences. And the thesis by Sivokon Maria, Topics, Sociodynamics of Values and Value-Based Focus of Employees of Russian Corporate Network Approaches, exemplified by Northwestern Region, is a graduate thesis which is of special importance for the development of sociological sciences. The thesis has new scientific developments which are of importance for the development of sociological sciences. The dissertation complies with the regulation of point 9 of the government of the Russian Federation of the 24th of September 2009, and the author can be awarded the degree of the Candidate of Social Studies, Major 220004, Social Studies, Institutions and Processes. Thank you very much, Elena Evgenievna. Dear Elena Evgenievna, thank you very much for your comments and recommendations. Your remarks and advice are important. Your first point is that the topic forms an approach according to which corporate values can be considered as a condition and a factor in the formation of value orientations of corporate employees. It is also argued that corporate values are able to satisfy the needs of the members of the corporations. Is there a substitution of concept of need for concept of value orientations? Are not these concepts identified? Despite the fact that value orientations and needs can be related as phenomena, but they're not identical as concepts and notions. The need means the need for social group or individual in certain conditions, means, or types of activity that are mandatory for existence and further development, according to Zoromislav. And this is our position as well. The idea of values and needs is different. Most likely, the context was not quite clear in the use of these categories. The text of the dissertation has too many details and excessive comment, and the repetitions might be found. We will take this into account, and in the future I'll try to formulate more accurately. Thank you, Елена Евгеньевна.
Елена Евгеньевна, удовлетворены ли вы ответом?
Да, спасибо.
Are you satisfied with the answer? Now it's time for me to talk about my review. But since all of them have been published, I would talk about remarks and questions. What I want to say that there is such an organization as Modern Russia, and it is undergoing the difficult process of institutionalization of work of different organizations. Which proves the relevance of the thesis. Getting to know the text of the thesis leaves me positive perception. Maria Viktorovna knows foreign works and domestic works on the literature. And the works provided by Russian scientists and foreign scientists allows you to use the scientific data to justify the conclusions and to clearly formulate the research priorities. The work published show that scientific ideas and recommendations are well grounded. And the study of historical context is supplemented by empirical approach, which justifies the scientific ground of the perception. It is clear that the results were published in articles and were presented at different conferences. And the results are based on the state statistics data. There is the author's approach to the understanding of the result of the research conducted, which proves the validity of the research conducted. As for the novelty, my colleagues mentioned the disproportion of the work, and the part of the work dedicated to the historical analysis is twice as much as the second part or the second chapter of the work. But there are certain trends of emergence, formation of the corporations themselves, and there are trends in formation and creation of Russian corporations. And there are processes of forming the system of values in the course of reproduction of corporations. I suppose that this disadvantage might be considered as an advantage of the thesis, the attempt to use the unity of historical and logical in the research work, which is a very important criteria of the scientific origin of work. Thus, I perceive that the characteristics of the process of social dynamics for corporate values is of interest. The way of diagnosing it from the point of view different of conceptual approaches is quite interesting. And the formulation of the description of methodological base was well conducted. And the diagnostic of cooperative values itself is important, and these are the advantages of the work which need to be emphasized. I would like to say that this thesis is the research of inadequately developed topic, which is highly relevant for modern sociology, the theory of social structure and social institutions and processes, and sociology of organizations and corporations. And the structure of the work seemed rather interesting to me. I paid attention to the comprehensive analysis of the subject of the research, which allows for comprehensive of the view of the topic and distinguish the main subjects and goals of the research. The practical applicability is also quite clear. This is what's related to the diagnostics of sociodynamics. Different authors talked about this issue. The material of the research might be used by bachelor students and master students, and used by municipal authorities to monitor cooperative values and to develop different analytical programs conducting sociological diagnostics of corporations. Everything which forms a part of sustainable development. So my perception is highly positive. But nevertheless, I do have certain remarks. In some cases, the interpretation of the concept of corporate values requires more detailization. In particular, this concerns the understanding of corporation as independent legal entity. Historically, as the authors show, the desire of corporation to achieve their position recognition as a legal entity, the desire to become a legal entity, was an actual value in the early periods of recognition of the corporation and their emergence.
Корпорация юридическим лицом.
Present, considering corporation a legal entity is determined by legislature, and from there on, the process of creation of corporation itself begins. There is such a contradiction about this. Therefore, the authors should be more careful in defining the corporate value or the desire of corporation to form a legal entity, well, at least in relation to Russian corporations. Another aspect, it seems to me that the issue of labor motivation system and the recognition of such systems as one of the corporate values requires additional discussion. In fact, each corporation is trying to create its unique system of incentive, develops this system constantly and always trying to use some new techniques. But how important they become for the employees, how generally accepted they are, they become values. Why do they become values and how do they become values? These all aspects require deep analysis. The third remark, I'd like to say that there is excessive categorical approach. Point 4 of the scientific novelty. Further along the text of the thesis, it becomes clear that different methods, including empirical methods, allow a comprehensive analysis of corporate values in practice. And the fourth remark, in a number of cases, the main information is included in the appendices. Well, it has already been mentioned, so it cannot be found in the main text of the thesis. Now, although I like these ideas found in the appendices, since they discuss very important issues of methodology and the theory of sociodynamics of corporate values. But despite these flaws, I can say that taking into account the relevance of the research and we consider that the thesis of Sivokon Maria Viktorovna, Sociodynamics of Values and Value-Based Focus of the Social and Cooperation Network approach exemplified by Northwestern region, is in line with the regulation of the 1st of September 6001/16 by St. Petersburg State University. And Sivokon Maria Viktorovna deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Social Sciences, Major 220004, Social Structures, Institutions and Processes. Points 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned procedure have not been violated. The chairman of the Gestation Council, Nikolai Alexandrovich Fruel. Dear Nikolai Alexandrovich, thank you for the detailed approach to my work. In some cases, the interpretation of the concept of corporate values requires more detailed comments.
Исторически, как показывает автор, стремление к...
In particular, when this concerns the understanding of corporation as independent legal entity. Historically, the desire of corporation to be recognized as a legal entity, it was a protracted period, and it was long ago. Currently, the corporation is considered a legal entity based on the legislature. From this on, the creation of corporation begins. So the author has to be more careful in defining the corporate value if we talk about Russian corporations. Dear Nikolai Alexandrovich, we have traced the problem of self-determination of corporations as legal entity in the historical and modern sense. Indeed, what was previously defined as the values and goals of the corporations, the desire to recognize the legal independence, later became the normative basis of any corporation. As the analysis of historical sources show, the process of recognizing corporations as a legal entity required lots of efforts on behalf of the corporation themselves. It was a difficult, contradictory and lengthy period. Now it is a recognized legislative basis for any corporation. Perhaps the multiplicity of interpretation arises precisely for the reasons of such a dual approach in understanding the history of emergence of corporations as legal entity. The next issue. The issue of labor motivation system, a recognition of such system as one of the cooperative values requires additional discussion. Such each corporation forms its own unique system of incentives and develops and constantly improves the system. But how important and accepted and shared by employees these principles become is enshrined in standards, methods and forms of motivation and incentive. In public corporations, as a rule, there are departments that are responsible for staff motivation and incentive. For example, HR, personnel training departments, social development departments, psychological support groups, etc. Such values as financial assistance, providing continuous training, medical support for employees, are regarded as important motivations. But as practice shows, not only what is declared as an important incentive is not viewed as such. Personnel motivation system can be perceived as significant and important technologies that affect the motivation of personnel activities. In some private corporation, the staff motivation system is undisclosed secret. The variety of systems and technologies for solving motivation problems affect the formation of employee values and can indeed be studied as an independent topic. Next question. The provision concerning the possibilities of the network analysis method as a method for diagnosing values, point 4 of scientific novelty, which is determined as the most adequate, seems to be somewhat overly categorical. Further in the text of the dissertation becomes clear that complex methods, including a variety of empirical methods, allow comprehensive analysis of corporate values in practice. The characteristic of network method
Наряду с этим, такое понимание, видимо, возникает, потому что мы хотели показать...
might seem very categorical. Probably it is due to the fact that we wanted to show this method as a more advantageous one, but as you rightly noted, corporate values should be studied as an integrated method, supplementing and summarizing the data of various technologies. In a number of places in the second chapter of the dissertation and the appendices, this is discussed. The next remark. In a number of cases, the main information on the research is included in the appendices and not included in the main text of the thesis. Although, in fact, such appendices discuss significant issues of theory, methodology, and methods of diagnosing sociodynamics and corporate values. We consider it an equal opportunity to present the information text in the attachments. In addition, the large volume of the dissertation didn't allow to place all the data and results in the text of the dissertation. Once again, thank you, Nikolai Alexandrovich, for your interest in this paper. Thank you for your answers. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, is everybody content with the remarks obtained? Yes, content. Yes, everything's fine. So we move on. According to the procedure, if anybody here from the hall wants to ask a question and you're not part of the Dissertation Council, you might ask a question. You need to introduce yourself. Well, we have exhausted the time limit and you might ask your question in no more than 2 minutes. Vladimir Petrovich Miletsky, Professor. Dear Chairman and the members of the Dissertation Council, everybody present, my name is Vladimir Petrovich Miletsky, Professor, the Faculty of Sociology at St. Petersburg State University. I've been part of different Dissertation Council for 37 years, starting from February 1985. I was the deputy chairman and chairman and the secretary. Last year I conducted the online defense as a chairman. So throughout these years I have seen many theses throughout these years, and they were different. But I would like to say that it's not very often that we can see papers that not only raise interest but are very interesting to read. As our professor, Professor Garver, said, living classic of sociology, this is a very tasty dissertation, so to say. That's why I decided to be the reviewer during the pre-defense period. And at that time, I gave a high appraisal of the research conducted and the result obtained by the author. And within this time that elapsed before the pre-defense and today's defense, I'd like to say that the applicant was able to further work on the text of the paper, which is exemplified by positive reviews from our distinguished opponents, despite well-grounded critics. But we know criticism. We can never encounter perfect text, and there might be certain flaws and drawbacks. But the main aspect is that Maria Viktorovna managed in her research to clearly define the object of research and the subject of research, the targets and aims, the goals and aims, and the relevant methodological base to study this underdeveloped topic, which is rather relevant for modern sociology. This work is also supported by the author's empirical research, including the research of respondents from state corporations, 253 people, and from private corporation, thus about 500 participants. And there were some random respondents, 2,271 respondents participated. 241 of them were from the Northwestern region. And the logical outcome was a comprehensive work, which is a search determinatory paper. This is why there were some remarks considering the paper. But I suppose that the conclusion that was stated by many reviewers was that Maria Viktorovna, based on multi-paradigm methodology with special emphasis on network approach, managed to cover the aspects of sociodynamics, which is novelty in itself, on value and value-oriented focus of the employees of corporations, exemplified by Northwestern corporations, which makes this work especially valuable in terms of its practical value. And the results are formed in the provisions for defense, and they reflect the point of view of the author, and they show the new heuristic and verified data on this not fully developed topic, which shows that we see in front of us a fully fledged researcher who is able to solve difficult issues. So Maria Viktorovna deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Social Sciences. And the work can be considered finite, original, and relevant, and worthy of support. And I urge the members of the Gestation Council to support this work during the roll call. Dear participants, do you have any questions? Thank you. According to the procedure, we need to voice the questions which have been received during the broadcast. of the defense. As of now, we have received questions from Habibulina Violeta Maksudovna, the candidate of Economic Sciences, Master of Science and Social Work, academic status, independent researcher. The questions are the following. On the methodology of the topic, on emergence into the research field. What have you defined as a Russian corporation in terms of regional representation, the financial status or the type of production? What types of corporations can be defined as your corporations? Do I have to read all the questions? There are 4 questions. Two. Do the corporations and marketing organizations presented in your research, which define themselves as independent and financially independent, since it might be an expanded definition of Russian corporation? The 3rd question. Do you have questions and doubts that based on the discussion you will get on real social process? Because officially you will not get such conventional norms as the inability to address police forces in terms of detection of violation of certain rights, or even violation of certain rights within the corporation. And the 4th question. Well, I will read this question, but I think it is not related. Which organization do you work for, and how long? If you are formerly a PhD student on sociology department, it demonstrates that you can participate in the work of several organizations. Well, this question is not related to the topic of thesis. What did you determine as a Russian corporation? The state financing part, and what types of state corporations form part of your definition of Russian corporation, and were they used as examples? I would like to thank for the questions asked. As for the way I determine corporation, the 1st chapter gives the information on the definition of corporation. Whether these corporations can exist? Yes, they can exist, but they were not the object of my social study. As for the corporations that I have studied, we have conducted studies in 15 corporations, and we found 2 corporations with similar properties. One was a state corporation, another was a private corporation. Will I use similar corporations? Well, maybe. But currently I'm interested in other type of corporations, the object of my research. The second question. In your list of state corporations, do you have research and marketing organizations self-defining as socially independent, since according to business strategies and obtaining revenue, it might be an expanded definition of a research corporation? Thank you very much for this question. In my research, I used two corporations, one private and one state corporation, since they have certain similar traits, such as the number of employees, the time of existence, and both of these corporations deal with manufacturing activity. Do you have certain limitations that, in accordance with the public discourse, you will get a so-called ideal picture, because you will not get such conventional norms as the prohibition of consulting law enforcement agencies in case of violating rights of the employees. Thank you for the question. The thing is that each sociological research faces such a problem as the lack of belief from behalf of the respondents. People who didn't want to answer questions didn't answer any questions. The questions were anonymous. So people were able to give quite unbiased answers. You don't have to answer the fourth question. It's not quite clear. Well, the person graduated from the Polytechnical institution. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your response. There are no more questions. So we give the floor to the scientific supervisor, Professor Durygin Pavel Petrovich. Please tell us about the applicant and the work. Yes, I know that within 3 hours, the scientific supervisor has no more than 3 minutes. Dear participants, dear colleagues, well, I've known the applicant for many years, and I can see her transformed under the influence of the cooperative culture. This is an independent, reliable, talented researcher. Within a very short period of time, she was able to conduct great work. The result of this work proved that in St. Petersburg State University we have a special discipline which is called the Diagnostic of Social Networks and Organizations, which is based on the work of Marina Viktorovna. She managed to publish the monography, which is a great thing for a young researcher. As a scientific supervisor, I'd like to say that based on the research conducted by Maria Viktorovna, she organized an initiative project in which about 25 and 30 people participate. This thesis is a very strong impetus for diagnostics. I'd like to say that On the basis of this research, we were able to conduct research in certain countries of Europe and Eastern Europe. And there are no powers that can otherwise assist the development of the society. And sociology needs to focus on the locomotives and the drivers of the modern economics. This work has a program work. It has a lot of published works and initiative. I'd like to say that not forget that this is a research conducted for private means. That was large work conducted, and I hope that the members will vote for. Dear colleagues, does anybody else want to express their opinion? Are there any more questions to the applicant? Then this is the end of the discussion. I have a question to the members of the Dissertation Council. Are there any questions to the applicant? Or remarks to the procedure? No questions. No questions. Then we move to the next point. Now it is 4 o'clock, 38 minutes Moscow time.
Уважаемые коллеги, сейчас у нас есть возможность перед началом голосования объявить перерыв для обсуждения.
Prior to the roll call, we might note it's a technical break. Is there a need for such a technical break to discuss the results of the defense? No. There is no need. We have discussed everything. We don't need a break. Then we continue with the meeting and move on into the voting procedure. The point of view of each member of the Dissertation Council is to be voiced separately. We move to the voting procedure. So your ideas considering the results of the defense? We move to the voting procedure. So, dear Brzezevich Svetoslav, your opinion. I'm for awarding the scientific degree to Maria Viktorovna Sivokon. I'm raising the question of awarding Maria Viktorovna Sivokon the scientific degree of Candidate of Sociological Sciences and Scientific Speciality, Social Structure, Institutions, and Processes. Professor Brozevich Svetoslav is for. Ludmila Nikolaevna, your opinion, I'm for. Professor Lipatova Maria Nikolaevna votes for. Rubtsova Maria Vladimirovna, I vote for. Larissa Grigorievna, I'm for. Yelena Evgenievna, Turandot, I'm for the awarding of the scientific degree of Candidate of Sociological Sciences to Sivokon Maria Viktorovna. And I, the chairman of the council, Nikolai Prul, vote for the awarding of the scientific degree of Candidate of Sociological Sciences, Scientific Speciality 22004. I'd like to remind all people present that more than half out of all the members, not less than 3 members of the Station Council, is considered to be positive according to point 23 of the procedure. The result of the voting allow me to count the votes, and the results are the following. Out of 6 participants of the Station Council, we awarding Maria Viktorovna Sivokon the scientific degree of Candidate of Sociological Sciences, Scientific Speciality, Social Structure, Institutions, and Processes on the topic Protection, Sociodynamics of Values, Value-Based Focus of Employees of Russian Corporation, was exemplified by of Western regions. 6 members of the Station Council voted for, no abstentions, no against. Thus, the decision to award Sivokon Maria Viktorovna of the academic degree of Candidate of Sociological Sciences in Scientific Speciality 22004, Social Structures, Institutions, and Processes, was adopted. Now we give the floor to the candidate. First of all, I would like to thank my scientific supervisor, Derigan Pavel Petrovich. I'd like to thank the Department of Sociology and Politology of Humanitarian Faculty of St. Petersburg Electrotechnical Institution, LITI. I also like to thank the Department of Applied Sociology of St. Petersburg State University, where my work of a sociologist started starting from 2009. I'd like to thank the chairperson and all the members of the Gestation Council for allowing me to defend my thesis. I would also like to thank the secretary. And I'd like to thank all the guests, Vladimir Petrovich, and I'd like to thank my parents who are present here today, who from the very beginning supported me, and all the other members of my family. Thank you all for attention. We congratulate the applicant, and the meeting is declared closed. Thank you all for participation. Turn off online broadcast of the meeting.
Спасибо.